for legal operators. We're going to be covering the basics, the legal, and the playbook. Just to kick it off, here's the agenda. As you can see, I'm not going off very far off the title. What we're also going to do is leave within each section the opportunity for you to ask questions throughout. We'll be looking at those questions, and then hopefully provide some key takeaways for each section. So that being said, my name is John Sanchez. I'm the Chief Business Officer at Congruity. I am the product owner for our legal and compliance solutions. And I'd like to ask each of the speakers, beginning with Eric, to provide a quick intro.
Great. Well, thanks, John. I'm so excited to be here today. I love this topic. And, I'm come through this as a technologist. So previous to what I'm doing now, I used to be the CIO for Sony Pictures Television, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. That it's kind of a leading studio and also has broadcast operations and done a lot of productions. So if anyone out there watched Breaking Bad, that would have been a Sony Pictures Television show, or Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy. And then I went on to be the CIO over at CAA, which is Creative Artist Agency, which is kind of the leading agency in the world for, I will say, really famous talent. So if anyone's heard of kind of Lady Gaga or Beyonce, that might be examples. But across kind of film, television, and sports. And I've been spending a lot of my career in media and entertainment. As you can imagine, we probably have some pretty interesting data that kind of needs some wrangling and governance in our industry. So that's me. Jesse.
All right, thanks, Eric. Jesse Murray. I paid my dues in law firms for a while. Paralegal, eDiscovery, but then made the jump to the tech world and joined Uber in 2015 and was there about 3.5 years, built up the discovery practice and information governance there before leaving Uber and going to Lime, the scooter micromobility company, now not just scooters, jump bikes as well, as you may have heard about. So really getting in early, some places earlier than others, and taking on the challenges of a fast growing business with a lot of potential issues, and just trying to implement best practices and lessons learned. As you might imagine, there's been quite a few, but really happy to dig into this topic. And James.
Yeah. So I love that Eric's already getting kudos in the comments for being responsible for Breaking Bad and bringing it to the world. So
it was definitely all me, for sure. I was
100%.
Not me.
I brought no such program in. James Shear, I'm a partner at Baker Hostetler, normally in New York, right now in a basement, as you can see. God bless COVID. And to Jesse's point, I guess I'm still putting in my time at a law firm. I did spend about 3 years in-house, actually in Michigan, and otherwise I've been practicing. So I do a lot in the space of information governance, and I co-lead our emerging tech team, and I focus a lot on our information governance and actually advanced analytics and artificial intelligence engagements. And as I hear, I've got 2 little boys who may be making an unscheduled appearance during this too. Just, they're not practicing law, so we'll worry about their licensure. And otherwise,
not yet. Not yet.
TBD, I suppose. But no, I'm excited for this discussion too. And it's fun when you get to pair up with people like Eric and with Jesse and John, people who have real world experience and can speak to things. It's not just all this, ideas. This is what's practical. This is what we've had to do. That's what we love bringing to our clients too. So thank you.
Great.
This is my Walter White Breaking Bad haircut.
Looks amazing.
Stay on topic. Thank you.
Looking good, Jesse. Looking good. Okay, so appreciate that introduction, gentlemen. Let's just set the table here. So legal operators, this is our audience. It's an emerging role, as we all know. It's really picked up speed over the last 3 to 5 years. It's probably been in existence for the last 10 to 20 years under different titles. But generally speaking, one of the challenges for legal operators, at least from what I hear, is colleagues asking, what exactly do you do? And from what I can tell, the legal operations role is really the legal whisperer, bringing in technology and efficiencies and programs and really trying to measure KPIs, metrics, and align the OGC's office basically with the overall business. And in talking to Eric and James and Jesse, is really interesting to get their perspectives on that job category. And what's really interesting is what Colin's developed here at Legal Operators is a framework for legal operators to build programs. So you see here the legal operators call it the 4 pillars: process, legal, technology, spend optimization, and data analytics. All of these things, when you're creating a program, absolutely involves data. And data, of course, is the life source of all organizations. So let's kick it off with Eric. What is data governance and why is it important?
Oh my gosh, I love this topic. Thanks, John. And yeah, I think, it's great coming out of this from, I'm the black sheep of this family because I'm on the technology side. And there's some of you out there might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's that guy in the IT department that's been trouble. It can never get on board with things. But I'm here to tell you today that how much I actually love the legal operators role. And I've been really blessed to work with some really great people and I think, John, you hit the nail on the head. Maybe not have had that title, but that's exactly the work that they've been doing in this emerging space, which I kind of feel like this is a digital transformation role. And that's what we kind of on the technology side, we've kind of been talking about this era as digital transformation. And I think this is one of these really critical roles about that. So I'm going to try to hit the what and the why. From my point of view, as a technologist that spent all of my career around data analytics, data management, and around media and entertainment. So let me go to this next page, which just has a quick picture of how I think about it. So today, to me, I think if you look at it and you ask this question, it's hey, great, every business is doing a business process. And then I ask the question, well, what actually is a business process? And if you think about that, and this is going to be pervasive in almost for the majority of actual business processes that we work with, a business process is really a kind of atomic task that in and of itself is received data as an input, is data, and then its job is to spit out data out as an output, right? That's kind of what we do is any business process. That's what our systems do, connecting in and out. So if you think about what is a modern workflow, well, a modern workflow is the interconnection of one piece of data to the next piece of data, to the next piece of data, and eventually you all get out to a result and you have kind of data-driven information. And I'll talk about this on the next slide. I think if you looked at every single business today, the vast majority of all business processes is exactly this, is what I call data in motion. That's all it is. It's data flowing through a company, right? So now you take one step back and say, oh my gosh, that's true. That's a true statement. Almost everything we do is some form of data in motion working through an organization. So that being the case, let's go down to the next slide. What's kind of the result of that? And I think one of the results of that is that you've started to see data becoming so important. Like James was kind of talking about some of the work that he's been doing kind of on the data science side. And so I think over the last 10 years, we've seen this rise in the data work, and we'll get to the legal operators in a second, of what businesses need to do. And what they need to do is they're having data-driven workflows, which is some people maybe call that automation or whatnot. In other words, how do we move data through these workflows faster? And we have teams of people that do that. They're kind of a combination of technologists and business people as they're looking to kind of move that data through. You have data insights, and everyone's aware of what that is. And that is kind of being able to look at this data, make meaning out of it, make good decisions as an organization, both what happened and can we predict the future. And then this other role that we've seen, which I almost feel like is the cousin of our legal operators, is our data operators. So we have kind of data ops or data operations that you see rising also as a digital transformation role. These companies kind of focusing in on actually the mechanics of harmonizing data, making sure that you set things up, things have nomenclature, and those things kind of on the quality side. And so you see organizations start kind of starting to look around that. And of course, we'll put eventually John, Jesse, or James is going to put that legal operators probably right in the middle of this picture, which is going to be awesome and the importance of it. So to really kind of make the point, I'm going to go to what the future looks like, because I like talking about the future. And if we went into the future, there's 3 really mega trends, and this is just going to put so much catalyst into exactly the importance of this role. And so let's talk about these. This is what I look at as a technologist, is these 3 technology mega trends. First of all, and I'll use my industry, every experience is going to be digital. There's going to be, I know that we're living in an all digital world right now. I actually made this like before COVID hit. So I'm not cheating, but every experience that we have is going to be digital. This experience today that we're having might've been a live conference at one point in time, and we're having it all digital. And if you think about where some of the innovation happened for that, it was companies like Netflix, which is a media and entertainment company, and really took this kind of analog broadcast experience that we had and turned it into a more interactive digital experience. And you see that across the board. You're seeing that with new technologies, AR, MR, digital twins. If you don't know what that is literally a digital representation of physical things, like a physical building, so you can virtually walk into it. Esports has come along as a thing. Apps have become, like Uber is actually a perfect example of a digital experience. It used to be I call on the phone. Now I have a digital experience to basically get to it. The next area, which is really important for this group, is everything is becoming data. So we started waking up to this probably maybe 7-8 years ago. But now we really are focused on making sure everything is tracked as data. And we're really tracking everything that's happening as data, whether it's, just our transactional or historical. But now if you're looking at media or even your security cams, video is data, audio is data. All of this, everything that we're doing is data. And everything that you're going to see, your biology information is data, right? You're going to be able to go reverse engineer my DNA cycle, and that's going to turn into data. And so now let's get into the last mega trend. Everything connects. So we have this huge transformation that's happened because of the cloud, right? We're all putting our things all connected into the same place. We have the kind of the IoT movement, the Internet of Things, where we have all these devices now that connect together. We have really fast networks that are happening. And that's, for those of you kind of following kind of Wi-Fi 6 or 5G, we're having these really fast networks that are happening. So what is this causing? This is causing us to have, and you see kind of yellowed down on the page, this massive need to govern all of these things that are driving so much flow of data, right? If you're creating so much data to so many experiences and our ability to have those connect in so many different ways, it puts a gigantic circle on this last piece, which is we really need to up our game from a governance point of view on how do we manage all of these things as they go forward. So I think from a why point of view, when John called me about this, he had me at hello. I was like, oh, absolutely. This is, if we don't get a handle on this, this is a nightmare for every single technologist that's out there, because this has to get figured out at scale. And we need to kind of help on getting there. So behind the scenes, what does that really mean, right? So we touched on a lot of these things. On the left-hand side, these would be things that like your CIO business organizations are kind of focused on. Some of the things we talked about already, right? So you have kind of protecting that data quality, intelligence, making sure you're getting rid of data that you don't need. I could talk about that one, John, by the way, if we want to, because for those of the people on the call, I did in fact live through the Sony cyber attack. So the whole thing about like getting rid of data, and if people say they can't get rid of data, I could tell you right now they're lying, because I've lived in a situation where we got rid of all of the data that we had. So I can tell you right now, like that is a really important area, and really kind of focusing on that sensitive data. We knew it before, but you look at that in context of that last page, and you know that we just created rocket fuel for this problem, right? So we need to kind of get a handle on that. In addition to that, the world has gotten so much smarter about the fact that, in fact, we all do in fact care that those things are being done, whether or not individual businesses choose to do it. We really need to make sure that we're all upping our game, because as a society, and multiple international societies have all said, you know what, we need to do better. So now you have privacy law, you have other laws that are dealing at a kind of an industry level, other kind of, we'll say where there's gray area, you end up with kind of legislative legal action. You have audits now that need to kind of come in to look at it, and contracts are flowing through these systems faster than ever. And one kind of side note for those people that are not in media entertainment, I always say a media entertainment company is a third a law firm, because I mean, we had literally a couple hundred lawyers on staff at Sony Pictures. What is media entertainment all about? It's all deal making. So this whole kind of contract area is something that's been kind of dear to my heart. So this is all really important. And you kind of look at that in context of, well, what does that mean inside of an organization? And you have all of this focus that's been on the left-hand side, right? So your IT shops, your tech groups like myself, HR, they've always taken care or wanted to take care of all this data. And there's a lot of work to do there kind of on the operational side. And this whole regulatory compliance piece is now kind of come in as a new lens that is kind of going across all of these different areas. Well, who's going to bring that to the table? Who on the internal teams inside of these organizations is going to do that? Well, it's the people that actually understand what you actually practically could do to actually implement these laws in reasonable ways and policies in reasonable ways that allow companies to do business and do that in a way that's also compliant. And so I think that's this kind of whole concept of those rise of data governance and this rise of kind of the legal operator, I think are pretty critical. So, So John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that was terrific. Thank you very much, Eric. You know, I'm going to ask you to save your thoughts on ROT and classification and unstructured data, probably for part 3 of this series, where we will be talking about data classification and compliance. But yeah, some really key takeaways, I think, here. You provide some great information. I think it's important to understand what data you have, right, when you're kicking off, for example, where it is, because, you know, obviously you can't, you know, really truly understand or measure your risk if you don't know what you have, you don't know where it is. So, you know, one of the playbook tips that we came up with over here was to say, hey, content owners are really important to legal operators. Get to know these people within your organization. You know, become friends with them, because they're going to be your new best friends when events or triggers happen. And in our world of legal, as James and Jesse will tell you, it's all about legal events. So that being said, I'm not seeing any questions right now, but any final thoughts on key takeaways, Eric?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that, you know, when you look at it, I always like to, how many people out there have seen Marie Kondo? If you have, you know, it's all kind of about like tidying up your world, and that's gonna give you to like a pretty good vibe, right? So for me, I think that this is all about making sure you're aware of the data that you have, right? Like in her world, she's gonna pile all your clothes into one place and force you to actually look at it. But back to that classification, all of those things, there's no question in my mind that it starts right there. You have to understand what you have so that you know what you're at risk from. You need to where it's coming and going from in those workflows. And you absolutely need to know where it's going, because, and I look at it the same way, whether it's an incident or event or whatever you're having to deal with, you have to be able to act quickly, and you have to be able to act efficiently. And you're only going to be able to do that if you're organized. And so, yeah, no question in my mind, this is just a critical role. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this presentation.
That's a great analogy. Absolutely love her. As we can see, a lot of people also love her. So our next slide here, it looks like something's blocked out there, but you know, our thesis is, and it's a good segue actually into the next section for the legal part of our discussion. So we hear it every day, probably some of us more than others, and it's preached us as it's this traditional three-legged stool, people, process, technology. And our thesis, especially with legal and our titles of legal operations, is that legal cannot be ignored. It has to be part of the equation, it has to be part of the consideration for every program that's initiated, especially when you see the headlines. Basically, every headline as it relates to data governance today is going to include something about privacy and security. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to James. And James, you know, when we, you know, many business people think of data, they think of data as just a technology problem. So here's the opportunity for you to tell the world that maybe data is not just a tech problem.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. It's, I mean, it's tough. We're put in a position where you want to think the best for the company or the organization, but you know there are a lot of considerations on the back end too. So how do you do the best in supporting the organization you're working at, hit its goals? Like the goal of an organization, it's not to like, okay, well, you know, what we do as a company is we make sure we're perfect with every single law and regulation that we can find. And that's not your business model. Your business model is we're creating this product, or we're doing this service, or we are riding the wave of information right now. To Eric's point, they're just awash in this free-flowing information society right now that's happening very, very quickly. Still spinning companies out of garages or WeWork spaces back in the before times, or whatever it was that was happening. When Jesse's working on these organizations, they're trying to get product out there. They're trying to get services spun up. They're reacting to market forces, and they're like, well, we want to do this thing. And sometimes we're asking forgiveness rather than permission. So how do you find the right balance for what you're bringing to the table as a legal operator, as part of that sphere of influence within an organization, where you want them to come to you for advice and for practical solutions? What you don't want to do is scare them off so that they just never tell you, or they figure, okay, well, 6 months from now, we'll figure it out then, when there really are true opportunities to assist with the process, establish a good framework so that you're better positioned. And this is not the pursuit of perfection. It's just not. We want to come in, we want to be able to present different risk cases, different scenarios. One of the things that I love to do for clients is just to tell them what other clients are doing. We can benchmark these practices, and we can say, okay, well, this is what other organizations ran into as challenges. This is how they confronted them. Here was the imperfect solution. Here's the risk tolerance they engaged in, and then here's the effect. So if I was sitting down with Eric, or if I was sitting down with Jesse, or the three of us were having a conversation, I would want to start to establish that. Right immediately before this call, I'm working with an organization who's figuring it out as they're talking it through. And part of what we want to do is we want them to think about it. So this first point here, data governance, it's not just a technology issue. I mean, it's not. But we encounter that a lot within the IG practice, where someone will say, how long do I keep email? I was like, well, how long do you keep things in envelopes? It kind of depends what's in a container. It's a different discussion point. I know you think of it as like this monolithic, this is an approach here, and we have to take an opportunity to step back, or we have to redefine it and say, well, is everything in this environment a record of convenience? In which case, we can think of it differently, perhaps. But we have to set the stage for how we walk through those things. So you're thinking about the attorneys and practitioners coming in and trying to provide solutions. Because if we don't, no one's going to come talk to us anymore. It's hard enough for me to keep a conversation. If I'm scaring people away, then you may not do this without speaking to legal, but you can circulate, and then you end up dealing with an event or a breach response or whatever it is. And then I'm really expensive to help you solve some of those problems rather than doing it strategically. And that's the difference between information governance and legal oversight. I think there's a practicality to getting the job done and doing it perfectly. Where's the balance here? Where can we get it to good enough and move forward? Where is the tolerance? Where are the operational efficiencies? Caught between a law and a law. This point here is just understand the tension. One of the reasons it's great to involve attorneys in the process is because we understand where the exceptions can be. There absolutely are exceptions. In fact, attorneys usually think of themselves as exceptional, and that's a different webinar entirely. But you've got these ideas that, okay, well, should I do this? I understand this is a general principle of what happens with exceptions. And of course, we get a lot of the questions coming in and saying, hey, do I need to worry about this? And well, I mean, if you brought it to me, you've already answered your own question, most likely. It's like, should we cancel the wedding? That's what we call a self-resolving question, because if you've got to ask, chances are yes. Like this is where you need to focus some of your resources, and it's good to know that. And then of course here, pulled in different directions and competency, at least on the slide. I mean, we're trying to think about the long haul for these information life cycles. And one of the challenges we've got currently in this environment with privacy is we know there's going to be so many more potential uses for this information in the future. But if we don't do the right formative things structurally at the beginning, then we might really limit the uses. It's like you buy property and you're thinking long haul, but you don't think about the air rights and you don't think about the mineral rights. Well, you've really limited yourself to what your expectations are. You've got to think about which direction do I go here? Which direction do I go here? How does all of that end up being part of my process here? How can I think about that? And part of that's just benchmarking with other people who have confronted similar situations. So
Can I just add, like, first of all, how much I love this, but for everybody here that's a legal operator, and by the way, is my voice okay to you? Because I'm getting a little echo. Okay.
Sounds great.
All right, good.
Good.
For technologists, that first line is so important, because technologists look at the problem as, what possibly can we do for the best user experience in every one of these cases? This is where they start. And being able to have that voice that brings in all those other constraints, those constraintive constraints, is critical to the conversation, because it's difficult to be both those things at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think James brings up some really great points about privacy, security, and disposition or retention. Any thoughts there, Eric, Jesse, from the business side, in terms of advice for a legal operator embarking on data governance and what lies ahead in the world of privacy and security? Yeah,
I'll let Jesse start with that.
Well, I think it's absolutely critical. I mean, you have to have an understanding. You don't have to be an expert necessarily, but you have to have an understanding of how your company, what your policy is, what your risks are. And as you said, have a close relationship to those people who are the stakeholders in privacy and security, and have an open door to those people so you can communicate freely with them. They may just think keeping everything secure is all you need to do and that's it. But there may be additional considerations that come from a compliance standpoint, that may come from access standpoint, may come from usability. If nobody can access anything and it's secure, maybe that doesn't help the company in terms of the business model. So, from my standpoint, I feel like ops, and James made a really good point, which is, companies I've worked at, legal is not considered a holdup. It should not be considered a holdup, like where things go to die, where great ideas go to die. The most successful lawyers that I've worked with, would advertise themselves as a business forward lawyer. And their job is to make things happen in a way that protects the company, protects, privacy, security, limits risk. But as you said, also, James, maybe finds the happy medium that meets the risk appetite of the company. Companies do engage in some risk, and it's up to leadership to make that call. But I feel like, from what I've seen, ops is there so that people don't bypass legal, so that people will come to legal and have solutions. They'll be empowered, sort of the user experience that Eric's describing. If you can go, and legal ops is set up a way for you to create your own NDA that is solid, and you don't have to bother people and load up their inbox to just try to get a simple NDA together to move a deal forward. That's where I see the role of ops, setting up these processes to deal with everyday business problems that are, that follow the legal guidelines, the policy that's been set up, but also keep the business moving. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, and you asked me about security, but
I think that's a great answer.
I've been taking notes, and I have so many notes now. I'm just not a very good note taker, so I'm just riffing here now. But
that's great.
Operational side and what you need to do, and I always think in specific examples. Like, if someone's like, "Do you do this?" It's like, have we done this? And this idea, like the legal ops, that team being solutions, helping people. Like, it's already difficult enough as it is. It's, if we have an idea of where we need things to go, helping our clients both internally and externally get there to do that work, that heavy lift. It's not just dropping a memo on somebody. We had some pretty extensive work we were doing with one client under the CCPA and certain requirements for how their policies worked. And a lot of questions that needed to be answered. And I had the associate kind of work something up, and she'd sent over the draft email that essentially, here are all the questions and here's the policy, fill in the blanks. And I said, that is not how this client, nor any client works. You have to say, here's where we're going to start. We're going to walk you through this. And the line was, that was it. Here's where we start. Take a quick look, and then we're going to set up a call to go through this. And the response from the client took the line I'd added, put it right back at the top of the chain and said, I'm really looking forward to this. They wanted the call. They wanted the explanation. They wanted that investment of time into walking it through. Like we are expected to be solution providers. And I hope with clients that we're working on now, we're trying to see over the tops of those trees for what's coming next. I mean, I'm not going to put my clients in a position where 3 years from now, they're like, oh my gosh, we don't own the rights to this data, or we can't use it, because that's where our industry has moved. Everything's digital, right, Eric? So that's where we need to be. We need to be thinking about how we position that platform to say, okay, well, let's take a step back. Maybe we're not going to execute the agreement today because we've got to iron out this one provision. We'll get it done in 2 days, but that's going to put you and your successors in the best position to move forward. And that's part of our job now. It just is. We are not memo writing machines. We are part of the business process to think about where these things go, because if we don't, we're just not going to be employed very much longer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a noble cause. I mean, on a whole bunch of fronts. And, maybe the only thing I would add to that conversation, just because we had a couple of people there that loved Marie Kondo, but imagine, I'm going to use an analogy that we use in media and entertainment, because in media entertainment world, where we deal with, millions of digital assets, just as a mental analogy, think of your garage, and think of a friend of yours, because it's not your garage, of course, it's a friend of yours, that has a really messy garage, and you need to go out and you need to go find something. It doesn't matter what it is, like a screw or whatever it is. And you go out there and it's a messy garage, and you're going to spend a long time to try to go to find it. So first of all, it would be bad if you had to get rid of all of those items because there was something wrong with it, because you would never be able to find them. But second of all, it's just hard to find when you need anything, because finding anything in a messy garage is hard. So when back to your question, John, a little bit about, hey, you're talking to people about, retention and some of these constraints and rules and whatnot. There's a really good part of this that increases inefficiency, because getting rid of all that crap that's just getting in the way and is not being used, and being able to categorize it, I think it increases efficiency. When you're trying to look for a bunch of junk, looking for something in a bunch of junk, it's hard to find. So it's bad from compliance point of view, and it's bad from an efficiency point of view.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a key takeaway there. So volume is not a strategy. It potentially, almost absolutely, increases your risk, and it certainly is going to increase your cost and overhead.
John comes
from
an
assessment. Like, how often do people are looking at files that are 3 years old? You all know what the answer to that question. Nobody looks at it. They all say they do, and they never do.
And John's from a legal document review background, so you're very familiar, I think, with how much money is to be made from reviewing a lot of documents that aren't relevant.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
interesting point.
It's like parenting, like you have to help the organization out. This is the organization that's helping the organization out. I mean, it has a skill set and a discipline around it. I love it.
Eric, I like your analogy. I did a onboarding for the legal team in the early days of Lime for new hires. And I basically had a picture of a junkyard and then a picture of a nice house with a manicured lawn. And, that's the idea. You don't want to save everything. You need to be vigilant about, and I think it's also important people need to know why, because they don't always know why. They think, well, they just assume legal wants them to keep everything, and that's just an assumption. And really making sure to educate people early and often of what the real focus is. Not that you're trying to hide anything, not that you're trying to do anything wrong. You're just trying to be an efficient company.
Yep, I love it, and I just so much love what James said. I look at the legal ops as absolutely a solution provider. And I saw it that way when I had my CIO hats on. Critical function.
Yes. So it sounds like we could talk about this for quite a while. And, in the interest of time, we're probably going to move on to the next one. But before that, just one question for James. Tying back to Eric's earlier point, about knowing where your data is and who the content owners are. How critical is it to you as a legal service provider when you're called on by a customer, for example, so you're helping them with an incident response, to know quickly who that content owner is, who is the point of accountability for certain data sources?
I mean, it's inherent in the process to answer questions. We don't want to make misrepresentations. Certainly with like incident response, I mean, there are certain regimes where you've got X number of hours in which you need to notify. And if you don't, then you're putting yourself at the mercy of those organizations. And for greater accountability, certainly it's an expensive process to go and try to construct data maps on the fly when you're working nights and weekends and everyone's working overtime. And it's tough enough to get answers about things. If you're involved in an emergency, you're dealing with the emergency, and you're not going to have a whole lot of answers there. If you also don't know anything about the things you should know about, right? It's the reverse Marie Kondo aspect. If everything's the unknown, we're just put in a very, very difficult position, and that's a challenge. People end up getting defensive. There's much more that can go wrong. And again, especially in those instances, we want to come in and be solution providers. The problem has already been provided. It's built in. I don't have to sell anybody on my services at that point. We know what we're trying to do. How much can we help? And we can only help to the extent that there is information that's known. And you don't want to find it out later, because then you still have to disclose it. And then you have to explain both what happened and then why you didn't know about it before. And I will say, like with incident response, you talk about information governance projects, and a lot of that work, certainly it's in support of the business. Certainly it helps things work better and more efficiently. People don't remain static. You want your business processes to be built on fresh information that's going to extrapolate out, as opposed to things that are outdated or don't work anymore. But I will also say that when you are dealing with a response or an emergency, one of the first things that regulators ask for is like, well, what are your policies? What are your practices? Show me your data map. Show me how these things work. And if you have nothing, it's not a great way to begin that discussion. And hopefully you can hear the dollar signs begin to roll out, because then it really does become a much more expensive endeavor for an organization that they have to address at that point.
John, I couldn't agree more with James. And here's one recommendation I might make for everybody out in the audience today. If you haven't done a tabletop exercise, you should do one in your organization with the cross-functional team that we all had there. Because I'll tell you right now, when you're in incident response, everybody wishes they would have done everything on the legal operators list last year. And it's a really great way to kind of highlight really all of these things and why. And why you're protecting them. It becomes very clear in a crisis situation, and we don't want that situation to be like that. And to what James just said is one that's, look, I've been through incident response before, and the truth is, when you can't find the owner of the data, it slows down the incident response, because you're trying to decide where you're going to spend your time. You only have so much time. And if someone can't tell you if there was critical data in that information or not, then you end up having to spend more time investigating that. And that might take away from other investigation of activities that you're doing. Go ahead, James.
So since we've already got some bad metaphors on the table, I usually come up with a good one, or actually a bad good one each time. So here's mine. And I just thought of this one, so I'm going to try it out in this group for the first time. But here's the deal. With doing this stuff, it is an inevitability. It just is. Like this is going to happen. The legal response is going to be required. So think of it this way: you're driving your car, and you see gas getting toward empty, and you're like, you know what? I'll deal with it when it goes to empty. I'll have to fill it up at some point. So you know what? I'll just wait until I run out of gas, and then I'll deal with it then. I mean, that is a strategy, but that trying to fill your car up with gas whenever it is that it runs out, no matter where that is a very different process than planning it out and being able to pull into the gas station. Same eventual effect, you get more gas in the car and you can keep going, but what a different experience. And that's what this is. Mapping some of these things out that are inevitable to do it beforehand is a very different experience than that 3 in the morning when your sysop calls you and says, oh, by the way, our production environment seems to be compromised. And I've got the FBI who just gave me a call about our stuff being sold on the dark web. Maybe we should come up with a process to deal with this. It's same thing, some of the same steps, very, very different circumstances.
Great point, guys. Great points there. So full tank of gas, great tires, well-oiled machine leads us into the perfect segue into the next topic, which is building out a program and creating a playbook for legal ops programs. So Jesse, legal ops, you're brought in, you're hired, you get that NDA, signature streamlined, you're done. It's a quick one, it's done. Now the real work begins, right? What's next? Where do you begin? Thoughts?
Yeah, so from my experience, it's nice to start from scratch. I will say that I sought out opportunities where I could start sort of at the beginning, which I think is always advantageous because you have less stuff you have to retroactively wade through to figure out what's what. So let's say blank slate. You're going ahead. What do you set up? I mean, from my point of view, some of the very first things to look at are understanding how is data created at your company. And Eric and James have spoken to this before. There's a lot of overlap here, but really breaking it down to its simplest components. You have employees, you may have contractors, you hire somebody, they start to create data. They start to create documents, emails, chat, whatever the case may be. They are a source. So do you have any processes or transactional things that are creating data as well? That's another source. Do you have customers that you support, customers that you interact with? That's another source. So trying to identify a single source of truth for all of these different pieces of data or owners of data, I feel is essential. You don't want to have all these different systems that refer to the same person in a different way, or that refer to the same process in different ways. You want to try to normalize these things because going forward, you're going to absolutely rely on that source of truth to find out the owner of data and incident response, to find out what needs to go and what needs to stay. So I feel like it's critical to be able to set up that source of truth from the beginning. And that takes collaboration with a CIO or with your IT department and really understanding what those systems are. They may have no idea. They may say, we haven't even thought of that, and trying to work out with them a way forward. But I feel like that's a critical first step before you even start to figure out how to make, the development of contracts easier. Go ahead.
You made such a good point there. It made me think because we have a pretty good audience, and I'm certainly speaking from my point of view, but knowing a lot of CIOs and different organizations, I think one thing is probably assessing the people on the ground. So you listen to a presentation like this, and I might say, hey, great, the IT shop actually has a pretty good idea where the data is, but there are some that probably don't. It depends if they have more infrastructure people on staff or they have more business systems people on staff. And every organization is a little different, but it doesn't change the principle of what you said, which is really trying to understand who knows the data and where it is, and then pulling those teams together and within your organization.
Yeah, I think, and what John said too, when I first started at Uber, I think the first 3 months I spent talking to people in all the different stakeholders, whether it's marketing, whether it's sysops, whether it's people on the app side, whether it's people on the data engineering side, and sitting down with each person and trying to understand what do they do, where do things go. And I don't need to become a software engineer. I don't need to become a security engineer or a marketing specialist. All I need to know is a general overview to start to build that map that we're talking about. To at least have some idea of where to go, get your arms around it. You don't have to be perfect, like James said, but you've got to have something, some idea before you can move forward, because the decisions you're going to have to make after that are, you know, and especially from like a legal ops side and working with your internal teams is like HR. When you onboard somebody, what's your process to onboard that person? How is access allocated to that person? What kind of security groups exist, and how are those determined? And then as they, you know, the life cycle of the data this person creates while they're at the company, what's the retention life cycle for their data? And, you know, not only that, but what are your legal obligations? You know, and that brings us to like a legal hold is a good example. If before you can implement any type of retention schedule on your data, you need to have the ability to preserve what you have to preserve. You need the ability to delete what you have to delete. You know, right to be forgotten. So how do you set this up in a way that you can be compliant? You can meet your legal obligations, not put the company at greater risk. And, you know, setting this up at the beginning is really essential. As Eric pointed out, there's a lot of things are connected now. You know, the only way you can connect things is you need that source of truth. You need to know how to connect to all the different pieces. So luckily, it's a lot easier now with SaaS-based applications, APIs, but it doesn't have to be that complex. What interests me are ways to do simple integrations that achieve a good result. So for example, the old legal hold way might be you get a complaint, you sit down with the team, you figure out who should be put on hold. Somebody drafts up the legal hold notice, they send it out, they alert either your eDiscovery team, your IT team, or somebody, hey, these are the people who are on hold. They track it somewhere. Then you go out and you lock down or preserve or archive or export all the different things that you know that they have access to. And then later on, you get into discovery and all that mess. But what if you have something where that person who drafts the hold, sends it out, automatically triggers preservation in these systems? I mean, that's ideal. Then they don't have to reach out to IT. They don't have to reach out to the discovery folks. They don't have to reach out to all these people. They draft it, they send it out, the hold's in place. Then you don't have to worry about it. Those are the types of processes I think that legal ops can do that help to minimize mistakes. I think it looks good down the road if you have this audit trail. You know, if someone wants to challenge your preservation, to be able to show that you have a sophisticated setup like this, which it's not actually that sophisticated, but compared to what a lot of people do, it definitely seems that way. And you know, James, you've probably seen a lot of different types of solutions out there, but to be able to show this is when we put out the legal hold, this is who we sent it to, here's the questionnaires that we sent, here's the information we got, and here's the information we preserved, I think really goes a long way. Once you do that and you know you're preserving the information, then you can start to look into cleaning up the house. Then you can look into, okay, well, what's the stuff that's not in our preservation bucket? What's the stuff that's not within our compliance obligations? Now we put in a policy to start getting rid of that. And you can do that knowing you can rest easy because it's stuff that you have, you have a good understanding of, and it's just a smart business practice to get rid of that data. I feel like that's one of the main first things I think you have to look at. There's a lot of other things as you had up there, John. How do you deal with law enforcement requests? How do you deal with your, service of process? Anything you can do to automate those processes, I think is it goes a long way. And I think also providing your clients, who would be, the stakeholders within the company, some way to make these requests of the legal team, whether it's some sort of internal portal, ticketing system, that everybody knows if I need this contract looked at, I can go and submit it here. It goes to the right person. It's tracked. Eyes are on it, and I'm good to go. Rather than sending out emails to my friend in legal, who do I send this to? Nobody gets back to you, and you sign a deal that's not very good for the company. Definitely happens. So how do you empower your clients to be able to make the best decisions for the company? I feel like that's really big. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts so far?
Yeah, go ahead, James.
Yeah, Jesse raised a point too about the legal hold process. And again, when I'm working on like an information governance framework for clients, we start with, where does this matter? It's great, and we know it's operationally sound to organize things and have it available and make sure you're using the best information. But man, it's tough to get people on. I mean, also everybody here, diet and exercise. Did you know that that's going to significantly improve your life? It will. It's magic. It's really, really hard to do. But you'll run if a car is chasing you. So you find the opportunities. It's I think with the legal hold too, the legal hold and challenges to legal holds and requests for production and litigation or in response to governmental inquiries, that's when that rubber hits the road. We know that's when processes are going to be challenged. And that's how we want to make sure we're positioned best to respond to those questions, because that's where we're really going to get in trouble. And then work backwards to operational efficiencies, to dealing with internal audit and certain regulatory frameworks or auditing frameworks and controls. That's what you want to do as legal. You want to say, okay, here are the risks. Here's how we would confront them right now. Here are the must-haves. Here are the like-to-haves. And then here's where we can help the business. And this is how we can help you do it. This is where we're not just a cost center. This is, we have ideas here. This is where we can improve these processes. Help us help you in defining these things out and improving processes. And frankly, improvements here will extrapolate out. Like that's going to be helpful. This is how we can do improvements, and that the questions we raise and surface where we've got some potential solutions, that's how we get involved in those discussions. We're going to get asked back to the table if we're helping solve things. We're not going to get asked back if all we do is say, no, that's a problem. You figure out a solution, but I'm going to be the impediment. They're just not going to come talk to you anymore. Those conversations will go around, and that's not where we want to be. We want to be at the table or on the stool or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think having the centralized method to receive these requests also helps the legal department for putting together a quarterly business review. What's the legal team doing? If you can show this is how we're helping the company, it helps the legal team quite a bit to be able to put together these metrics and present them and show, because legal is not a revenue generator normally, it's a cost center. So how do you show your worth? How do you show what legal is doing for the company? Setting up a program that accounts for all the work that's being done really helps the legal team show its value down the road. And for like a fast growth startup that thinks that legal is more of a necessity than something to help drive the business, in some ways, it's very helpful to show that they're actually helping the business, helping move the business along and protect it, and having these metrics available, and not having to go back and dig them up from all these different sources every time you need it is really valuable, and it frees up time for the legal team as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only thing I would like to add to this, I'm going to keep doubling down on this feeling that I have that, look, I believe this is a noble cause in a multiple different fronts. Your companies are going to operate better. Someone I asked the question about like setting up a data governance program. Maybe it's from John, some other webinar, some other day, but I'm a big advocate of master data management programs. Those have two effects when you do those. One is it helps you know where your data is, where it's being authored, and where it goes. And the second effect, it dramatically improves the operations of your company. And so these programs, when we talk about data governance, it's not something people think about. There's few number of people that have roles that think about how the whole organization works together. And those are the things in this new world, in this digital transformed world, that are going to allow companies to perform at a higher level. And it's going to keep them more secure. I actually see this as a part of cybersecurity. You know what? You can't lose any data that you don't have. So companies that have data governance in place have a lower likelihood of losing data in an incident than companies that don't. And so it's a noble cause.
And you don't have to pay lawyers to review that data that you don't have.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for the IT guys. It's good for the business. Like this, it's a noble cause. It's good. It's good for the consumers or the whoever's data that you had. Right. It's a good thing to do. This is a good thing.
This is lots of great points here. We're coming to the hour. For any attendees that have a hard stop, thank you for joining us today. Quick shout out to Mallory Maynard and Ryan Kennedy on my team to help put this together. So we will take some questions here. But before that, I just want to wrap up on some key points and summarize here. Really great points in creating a playbook. It really sounds like, Jesse, it's really about being customer obsessed, really understanding every step of your customer's journey and in building out a program like legal hold or whatever it may be, contract management or et cetera. But it really sounds like, to me, and I'm hearing some positive things from Eric on the business side and also from James, that there really is this intersection, this requirement that there has to be cooperation across the organization to build out a defensible data governance program that is going to be compliant, it's going to save costs, et cetera. Final thoughts on that, and then we'll take a couple questions here. Eric, we'll start with you.
Sure. I could talk about support this for forever. Obviously, I think that we had that page originally that showed the large cross-functional team that all plays a role this, and everybody has a different view on the data, and they all have a role to play. I think this legal operator's role is the place where the rubber hits the road. And for me, being able to make this kind of like a real-time thing. I mean, you and I spoke, and I kind of feel like this is that, in technology, we talk about like agile methodologies and allow us to deliver solutions faster. This to me is actually kind of the call on the legal side, which is where kind of technology innovation meets kind of legal innovation. And this stuff that needs to happen real time. And you know what? That's the legal. There's no other person that has this role. We have DevOps, we have data ops, we need legal ops. This stuff has to happen in real time. It's the implementation of policy in companies, and the tech teams need it, the business teams need it. They need the guidance.
That's terrific. I think Colin's going to want to just quote you on legal operators where the rubber hits the road. Love that. James, any final thoughts?
I think it comes back to, please, though, if your legal operations, come with solutions in hand, at least propose solutions. Like you can't show up just with a bunch of problems. Like that's if it ever was legal's job, it's not anymore. We have to come in and say, here's what we expect and appreciate, that there are going to be some challenges here. And part of our job is to recognize and confront those challenges. And here's how we do it. Here are some thoughts. And if you don't have those initial thoughts, that's when your outside resources, benchmarking across industries, working with your outside counsel, working with third-party providers. That's our jobs now. It is to provide solutions. And I hope that you're working with those parties that are coming to the table with proposed solutions as well. Because if not, you're just not going to get traction, and it's not going to get done.
I agree. It's a creative job.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Definitely a business forward lawyer. Jesse Murray, final thoughts.
Yeah, I would just say beware the silos. Every company has them, and the legal ops function's job is to break down those silos and look inside all the different sections. It's inevitable that it happens. And also a company like Lime, we are decentralized. We operate. We have like a a mini company in cities all over the world. Uber was the same way. How do you make cohesion across all of these different business entities that are existing with different goals? And it's a very unique and exciting role to have, to be able to sit at a company and be justified in understanding all aspects of the company. It's very rare to have a position where you can do that. I think people who really are interested in that and can really communicate with all engineers, marketers, finance. It's such a great way to learn how the company operates and then be able to implement what you learn. Pretty cool.
Great, thank you, Jesse. So we have one question from Tom Coonan here. What are the main, and this looks like it's for you, James. What are the main laws which should be considered by an EU law firm when setting up data governance policies?
Well, I mean, there are certainly GDPR requirements specific to information governance. And if you're an EU law firm, chances are you're dealing with breach notification too. And part of it's going to be what you need to do on your side for managing information. And the other is what you need to do for your clients, or what kind of advice you're giving to clients. So I think it's not just an EU law firm, but it is everybody's multinational these days. And if you're getting to that point where you're getting sophisticated legal advice, chances are you have operations that span the globe. You really do have to think about those intersections. And there's not always clear lines. There's certainly not one gold standard for approach. So asking the right questions, thinking through what the application is, and then figuring out what regime you're going to apply. It's tricky, but it's certainly doable.
Okay, terrific. Jesse, looks like there's a question for you from Dana Latique. Where does the legal ops position typically reside? What department can influence its role and strength? Supply chain, sales, legal, etc.
In my experience, legal ops has sat under the GC. But I think it really depends on the company and what the goals are of the company and what they want this role to accomplish. But yeah, I've seen it sit in legal. I think you have the most weight if you're sitting in legal than other places. Sorry, Eric, if you.
No, I agree. I wouldn't want it anywhere else.
Yeah, I think, but you need buy-in. You have to have buy-in from your GC and from leadership if it's really going to work. That you really have to make sure they understand the importance of the role, and that will influence supply chain, et cetera. And I think getting in early, letting people know early and often what the role is of legal at the company. I think you can sell them without you don't need to carry a big stick to make people respond. And as James said, they'll probably just shy away. You want to engage people and educate them, and empower them to make use of the legal operations function.
Yeah, great point about executive sponsorship and getting the right executive sponsorship when starting a program. Okay, well, we have a final amen there from Felice Gray Kemp. Thank you very much. I think that's a great way to wrap up this session. So thank you, Colin, for the opportunity, and thank you to the panelists here, Eric, Jesse, and James, for joining us today.
Our pleasure.
Well, I just got a couple of takeaways for the community. If there's anybody still on, first of all, I want to thank you to all attendees. We are grateful to you for giving us, your time today. We know it's valuable. I truly hope that we're adding you value. It seems like we had an amazing panel. I want to thank our partner, Congruity 360, for today's event. This is a part one of a three-part series. I want to thank Eric, James, Jesse, and John. Fantastic session, gentlemen. Amazing. So this puts part one of a three-part series, concludes it. I will follow up a recording of the event and a copy of the slide deck, a PDF copy for the attendees today. And with that, have a great rest of your week, and I'm delighted we could do this together. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.